If this continued, even if he was not shot to death by the arrows, he would be submerged in the swamp and disappear from this world. No matter what he did, he couldn't escape death. He was in a dilemma. What a vicious scheme. The Imperial bodyguard waved his hand, and a new round of arrows came one after another. This time, it was even more concentrated. Jiang Xing slowly lifted his saber, but before he could swing it, the arrows that were still in the air seemed to have been possessed by some evil spirit, and they fell to the ground in midair. In the distance, there was a series of bang, 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 bang sounds of swords and knives colliding, and the urgent sound of horse hooves. He focused his eyes and saw that there was actually a group of people galloping from the depths of the ebony forest. Wherever they went, they chopped down the people who had knocked their bows and shot arrows. This group of people arrived abruptly. Not only was Jiang Xing astonished, but the Imperial bodyguards were also shocked. One by one, they turned around to deal with the people on the horses. They were too far away, so Jiang Xing could not see clearly. The two men at the front had unfamiliar facial features, but there was a horse in the middle that rode slightly slower. The person on the horse was dressed in red and wore a bamboo hat. Jiang Xing could not see the person's face clearly, but he felt that there was something strange in his heart. On the horse's back, Jiang Ruan clenched her fists tightly. Even after experiencing the painful torment of her previous life, she thought that her temperament had been tempered to be tenacious and cold. However, when she saw the situation in front of her, she still felt an irresistible anger from the bottom of her heart. So, in her previous life, this was the truth behind Jiang Xing's death. The eldest young master of the Jiang family, who had thought that he would be able to return home in splendor with the wind of success, had been trapped in this dark and gloomy ebony forest, like a trapped beast trapped in a swamp. Thousands of arrows pierced through his heart, and he died. In a place not far from the capital, he had quietly disappeared from this world. The Xia family, the Jiang family, the Li family. If she did not collect this debt, she, Jiang Ruan, swore that she was not a human. The archers lying in ambush in the depths of the forest saw that the situation was not right and began to exchange blows with the people that Zhao Yuanfeng had brought with him. However, there were simply too many archers, and for a moment, it was difficult to distinguish who was superior and who was superior. Seeing that Jiang Xing's body was still slowly sinking into the swamp, Jiang Ruan's heart shivered. She no longer thought about it and urged her horse to rush straight towards Jiang Xing. The Imperial bodyguards had originally thought that the situation had already been settled. Jiang Ruan had already taken off the bamboo hat on her head and thrown it to the side, revealing her face under the hat. Seeing Jiang Xing's blank expression, she smiled slightly and said, "Eldest brother." Jiang Xing stared motionlessly at the young girl in front of him. Ever since he had left the capital 5 years ago, he had not heard any news of Jiang Ruan. The young girl in front of him was extremely unfamiliar, but there was a sense of familiarity between her brows. Who was this? In his memory, the young and adorable girl who would pull on his clothes and call him eldest brother had already disappeared. The young girl in front of him now had the appearance of a young and inexperienced girl. She had lost the childishness she once had, and was now like a blossoming flower. His younger sister had grown up. Jiang Xing's eyes became hot and he called out, "R1." While Jiang Xing was sizing up Jiang Ruan was also quietly sizing him up. The Jiang family had always valued literature and belittled martial arts. The descendants of the Jiang family were also not allowed to enter the martial path, so they could only follow literature. Jiang Xing had always had the appearance of a gentle and refined young master. Although his brows were still handsome, the gentle and refined youth of the past had faded away. His skin was darker than before, but in its place was a kind of iron blood that had been baptized on the battlefield. The fortitude that belonged to a soldier. This was completely different from the Jiang Xing in her memory. When they met again, it had already been a lifetime ago. She slowly walked forward, and Jiang Xing lowered his head to look at her. Jiang Ruan gently opened her arms, ignoring the gazes of the crowd, and hugged Jiang Xing. She said, Welcome back, eldest brother. The brother and sister finally met. Zhao Yuanfeng rubbed his sore eyes and said to Xiao Xiao and Guan Lianghan, who were standing to the side, Xiao Wangye, General Guan, why are you here? Before Xiao Xiao could answer, Guan Lianghan said, someone has laid their hands on my deputy general, how can I stand idly by? I would like to see who has the guts to dare to plot against me. Guan Lianghan and Xiao Xiao suddenly made a move. Zhao Yuanfeng frowned, and Zhao Yi was also somewhat at a loss. Jiang Yuan smiled slightly, then many thanks to Wangye and General. These people have prepared so many archers, and it does not seem like something that an ordinary person could do. Perhaps it is a conspiracy of another country, or perhaps it is an army that wants to rebel. This is no small matter, and it concerns the safety of the De Jin dynasty. I would like to trouble the two Darren to investigate thoroughly. The moment she opened her mouth, she pushed the matter to a conspiracy of rebellion, exaggerating the truth. When the people on the ground heard this, they all glared at Jiang Yuan. It was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. As soon as these words came out, everyone started discussing. I was wondering why he looked so familiar. Turns out it's the eldest son of the Jiang family. TSK, I haven't heard from him for so many years. Now, I can finally hold my head high. So the Jiang family has an eldest young master. I don't think I've ever heard anyone in the Jiang Fu mention this. What was there to be confused about? The Jiang family was now ruled by a stepmother. After all, she was not a biological daughter. Hadn't there been no news of the eldest miss of the Jiang family for more than 5 years? I'm afraid that eldest young Master Jiang didn't leave home of his own accord. All in all, it's all good now. The eldest Jiang young master has achieved military merits, and the eldest Jiang young lady is also a jade-like person. In comparison, the eldest Jiang young master is more promising than the second Jiang young master. I don't know what Minister Jiang is thinking. Instead of feeling sorry for such an outstanding eldest young master, he dotes on the second young master. You don't understand. He's a man. What's there to say about favoring his concubine and neglecting his wife? When the original mistress of the household was still around, the current Jiang Furen was just a concubine. The crowd was bustling with discussion. There were all sorts of things being said. Most of them were praising Jiang Xing and his sister while belittling Xia Yan's family. Jiang Yuan leaned against the carriage and smiled faintly. Trampling on the weak and flattering the strong had always been the trend of the people. Now that Jiang Xing was young and promising, his official career was promising. Naturally, there were countless praises for him. The more outstanding he was, the more incompetent Jiang Chao appeared. In Yan Huayuan, Xia Yan was leaning against a soft couch and slowly drinking tea. Today, she only needed to arrange everything properly. With the Xia family and the Li family's help, she did not believe that Jiang Xing would be able to escape this calamity. She took a sip of tea. Now that Jiang Xing was dead, Jiang Yuan was nothing to worry about. She had all the time in the world to tidy up. However, she did not know why, but early this morning, she had a faint feeling of unease in her heart. Her expression unconsciously revealed a trace of impatience. Seeing this, Feitsue comforted her, Furen need not worry. This matter is absolutely safe. Just wait for the good news. Xia Yan did not speak. She saw that the curtain in the room had been lifted and Lin Lang hurriedly walked in. Her expression was somewhat panicked as she said, not good, Furen, eldest young master has returned. What did you say? Xia Yan suddenly stood up, her beautiful face full of malevolence. She grabbed Lin Lang's shoulder and said, Jiang Xing has returned? How is this possible? Are you sure you didn't see wrongly? Apart from the old Jiang madam, who was in poor health, everyone in the Jiang family was present. When Jiang Xing faced Jiang Quan, he only nodded his head in an extremely courteous manner, father. Seeing him like this, a gloomy feeling rose in Jiang Quan's heart. Now that this son of his had become so outstanding, it was even more impossible to control. He looked at Jiang Ruan standing by Jiang Xing's side. This pair of children both had outstanding looks and temperaments, but they had crawled out of Zhao Mei's belly. Jiang Su's expression did not reveal anything, but Jiang Chao's face was taut as he stared fixedly at Jiang Xing. His gaze was like that of a poisonous snake. Jiang Ruan noticed his gaze, so she looked over and smiled at Jiang Chao. In Jiang Chao's eyes, this smile was a naked provocation. He slowly clenched his fists and curled up his broken little finger. He only felt that the gazes of everyone around him were a joke. Jiang Ruan's smile did not change. Comparison. When two people of the same status appeared in the same fu, what people loved to do the most was to compare. In her previous life, people had compared her with Jiang Su. The more outstanding Jiang Su was, the more unbearable she was. Such a comparison could completely destroy a person. If the other party had been Jiang Chao, who had always been held in high regard by Jiang Quan, and the arrogant Jiang Chao, would he have done something impulsively if he was given a taste of being compared to someone of inferior quality? He had been locked in his room and could not make a move. What if he took the initiative to attack? Jiang Li and Second Yinyang stared hatefully at Jiang Xing. Their hearts were filled with jealousy and hatred. With Jiang Xing's return, at least for the time being, no one in the Fu would dare to openly bully Jiang Ruan. How could Jiang Ruan's life be so good? She had reached this stage, yet she still had such a famous older brother to rely on. Hong Ying secretly heaved a sigh of relief. In her heart, she rejoiced that she had not become Jiang Ruan's enemy. Jiang Xing had returned, and with the status of deputy general. At least, Xia Yan's days in the Fu would not be so relaxed. She wondered if Jiang Ruan would fulfill her promise and really let her sit in the position of the mistress of the household. Hong Ying's heart was secretly excited. Standing at the Fu's entrance, Jiang Xing exchanged a few insincere words with the Jiang family. Then, he showed a trace of weariness. I am very tired. I want to go back and have a few words with our Wan. If there is anything else, we can talk about it at night. These two siblings had just reunited, so they had a lot to talk about. It would not be good for them to stop them. Just as Jiang Xing was about to enter the door, Xia Yan finally could not help but ask, Xing, on your way back, did you encounter anything? Mother, what do you think I should encounter? Chapter 85. The interrogator was Xiao Xiao. Xiao Xiao was in charge of the brocade guards. Usually, when they went on special missions, they would occasionally catch people who refused to speak. Under his interrogation, these people had never lasted to the end. The less people saw it, the fiercer the rumors spread. There was a saying in the Great Jin dynasty, there was no mouth that Xiao Xiao could not pry open. Unfortunately, his temperament was cold and cheerless. Even those who knew him did not dare to question him personally. They could only guess that the torture method was incomparably cruel. When Xia Cheng heard this, he felt his heart sink. He clenched his fists and said, how did they fall into Xiao Xiao's hands? What does Xiao Xiao have to do with Jiang Xing? During the ambush, General Guan and Xiao Wanye suddenly arrived. General Guan wanted to bring those people back, but Xiao Wanye said that it was an important matter and asked him to personally interrogate them. Oh no! Xia Cheng's face paled. If the Xia Fu is implicated, how can we have good days in the future? He paced back and forth in the room twice. This won't do, I have to go find 8th Prince. Quickly prepare the horse. At the same time, in the capital, the Prime Minister's Fu was also in a complete mess. Li Dong angrily pointed at Lian and scolded, have you lost your mind? Now, the people have fallen into Xiao Xiao's hands. No matter how forgiving the emperor is, he will not tolerate privately raising troops. You've made such a big mess for the Li family. What should we do next? Lian had always been Li Dong's pride and had praised him since he was young. However, Li Yang's accident had upset him, and now Lian had made such a big mistake. Li Dong no longer saw Lian as pleasing to the eye. Lian stood where he was with a cold expression. He did not say a word, but his expression was very gloomy. He had wanted to use the Jiang family's matter to attack Jiang Xing. He could rope in the Jiang family and also see Jiang Ruan suffer. He did not expect that Guan Lianghan and Xiao Xiao would appear and ruin his plans. However, Lian's eyes flashed. He had heard that Zhao Yuanfeng and Zhao Yi were also present at the time. How could it be so coincidental? For some reason, a cold and smiling face appeared in front of Lian. He did not believe that this matter had nothing to do with Jiang Ruan. When Li Dong saw Lian's silence, he became even more furious and said, "Hurry up and think of something. Your eldest brother has become a cripple because of the Jiang clan. Are you going to ruin the entire Prime Minister's residence for the Jiang clan? What's the rush?" Lian said disdainfully, "I'll talk to the 8th prince about this." Xianli needed his wisdom, and he needed Xianli to help the Li family solve the problem in front of them. Outside the dungeon, Guan Lianghan was waiting anxiously when Xiao Xiao slowly walked out from inside. Upon seeing him, Guan Lianghan anxiously asked, "How is it?" All of them confessed. "It's Xia Cheng and Li Dong's men," Xiao Xiao said calmly. These people were actually divided into two groups. Xia Cheng was one thing, but according to those people, it was only to prevent Jiang Xing from harming Jiang Chao's position when he returned to the Jiangfu. However, the people arranged by Li Dong were strange. The people he sent did not know the reason, and only knew that this was an order. Guan Lianghan muttered, "It's really strange, why are there two groups?" He patted Xiao Xiao's chest, "You're really something." However, Guan Lianghan looked inside, "What method did you use? Could it be that it's the same as what that girl from the Jiang family said, that you scalded your brain with hot oil?" "No." Xiao Xiao replied. Naturally, he had his own methods. He did not say anything, and Guan Lianghan was too lazy to ask. He only talked to him while saying, "Hey, say, Jiang Xing is such a good-natured person, how can he have such a younger sister? They don't seem like siblings at all. Lao San, you can't possibly really like that girl, right?" "I don't think so. She's so young, but her mind is already so vicious." Xiao Xiao helplessly said, "She's only 11 years old." Towards an 11-year-old girl, he would not have any other thoughts. It was just that Jiang Ruan's way of doing things was too strange, and she seemed to have a lot of secrets. From the things she did, it seemed that she was inextricably linked to Xianli. She even helped Lu Min. If her goal was the entire court, then he needed to pay even more attention. Guan Lianghan laughed heartily, "Just kidding, just kidding. Let's go, I still have something to ask Lao Qi. Come with me." Xiao Xiao nodded, "Yi Feng." Yi Feng appeared behind him only to hear Xiao Xiao order, "Send someone to guard the few people in the prison, to prevent anyone from silencing them tonight." Yi Feng cupped his hands in greeting, "Yes, Master." In the 8th prince's fu, Xianli looked at Xia Cheng and Lian in front of him with his usual gentle smile. Xia Cheng wiped his sweat, "I implore your highness to lend us a hand. The Marquis and I have always been close, so naturally, I will not sit idly by. However, this matter is of great importance. Even if I have the intention, I am truly powerless." Xianli slowly said. Xia Cheng glanced at Lian, who had a calm demeanor, and made up his mind. Gritting his teeth, he said, "I implore your highness to save the Xia Fu. If your highness is able to help in this matter, your highness will be the savior of the entire Xia Fu. If there is anything in the future that requires the Xia Fu's help, Xia Cheng, hereby swear that I will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation." All along, the Xia family and the 8th prince's Fu had a relationship of mutual support. Although the 8th prince was extremely capable, he had always done so in secret. Didn't I say before that even if you want to be a swindler, Great Master also wants to be the most honorable swindler in the world? Now, Great Master has merely obtained a small profit. Your esteemed son's illness is only treating the symptoms but not the root cause. Can Great Master really be satisfied? His son was Huiju's sore point, but every time Jiang Yuan spoke of his son. These days, he had earned a lot of money and bought a lot of expensive medicinal herbs. However, his child's condition could only be stabilized, not improved. Huiju lowered his head and said, "This is his fate, this monk is also powerless. Great Master does not believe me." Jiang Yuan said, "No matter, there will come a day when you will believe my words. I will only say what I want to say today." She said, "Recently, the flood in the capital has been quite serious. The 8th Prince and 2nd Young Master Li have received an imperial edict to control the flood. Currently, the water level in the reservoir seems to be under control, but after 3 days, the rain is bound to start pouring fiercely. The reservoir will collapse, and countless commoners living near the reservoir will lose their lives." She said, "This is your opportunity. I will give this prophecy opportunity to you. You only need to say in front of everyone that the imperial aura is in disorder, the reservoir is going to collapse, and that you must ask the 8th Prince to change the location of the flood control. Of course, you must think of a way to make the 8th Prince stick to his own opinion. He will certainly punish you. The more severe his punishment is, the more secure your position will be after the prophecy comes true in a few days." At first, Huiju did not understand what she was talking about. He looked at Jiang Yuan doubtfully. Jiang Yuan was not anxious, and only patiently waited for him. When Huiju realized the meaning behind Jiang Yuan's words, his usually calm face could not help but show a trace of astonishment. What are you talking about? Why will the reservoir collapse? The water level will become fierce? Ridiculous. That's nonsense. What is the Great Master panicking about?" Jiang Yuan smiled and said, "Do you not believe what I said? Great Master, didn't I tell you that there is a kind of ability in this world, which is to know the past and understand the future?" She enunciated each word clearly. "The Great Master believes that I do not have this ability. Then can you think about it from another angle? For example, how to make a reservoir collapse for sure?" Huiju suddenly stood up. He could no longer maintain his bemoaning and pitying mask, and hurriedly said, "Are you crazy? If someone finds out, they will lose their head." Jiang Yuan looked at him with a slight smile and did not speak. She was deliberately misleading Huiju. To believe that a person had the ability to prophesy and be willing to do things for her was really too risky. But what if Huiju thought that she was just a cover, and that there was an expert guiding her from behind? Prophecy could be wrong, but man-made arrangements would not fail. Huiju thought that someone wanted to make the reservoir collapse. Once he was sure of this, he would be swayed. "This is too daring," Huiju muttered. The reservoir was an important matter related to the people's livelihood, but Jiang Yuan had so casually mentioned such a treasonous matter. If it was known by others, even 9 lives would not be enough to kill her. But at the same time, there was another voice in his heart shouting, "Agree to her, agree to her." Jiang Yuan smiled as she looked at the change in Huiju's expression, and knew that he was moved. Without hesitation, she added fuel to the fire. "The Great Master must think clearly. This is a foolproof matter. As long as you move your lips, when the day really comes, the people of the world will worship you like a god. You will enjoy endless glory, splendor, wealth and rank. If you are favored by His Majesty and enter the palace, you will be able to fight for a good future. There will be countless imperial physicians in the palace, and your son's illness will also be cured." Huiju's eyes brightened, only to hear Jiang Yuan continue, "But this matter is not completely without benefits. After this matter, the 8th Prince will definitely hate you. But you need not worry, as long as you are favored by His Majesty, you will be a favored person in front of His Majesty, and no one will dare to touch you. Although the 8th Prince is powerful and influential, he is not the master of the world now. The Great Master is now almost 60 years old. To put it bluntly, who knows what will happen in 10 or 20 years? In short, while you are alive, your life will not be in danger. If the Great Master must live peacefully, it is not impossible. It is just that the Great Master can afford to wait, but I do not know if your son can." Huiju's expression was uncertain, and his heart was very conflicted. Jiang Ruan smiled and said, "Since the matter has come to this, I will not say more. The great master has one night to consider. After 3 days, the reservoir will collapse. You only have 3 days' time. As for what your son will be like in the future, it will depend on what the great master does tomorrow." Chapter 86. Today, she had deliberately guided Huiju. Tomorrow, Huiju's actions would depend on his courage. The greater his courage, the greater the benefits he would gain from this game. She stood beside her tall and valiant older brother with a gentle smile, causing the 3 people opposite her to turn pale with anger. Jiang Su stood up, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know how Su Nyang angered Diju. I greeted Diju, but Diju not only ignored me, but also spoke rudely." Second brother could not stand it and said a few words to Diju. Who knew that when Diju came back, without saying a word, he knocked second brother to the ground. Pretending, still pretending. Jiang Ruan looked at her coldly. Her body was already a little tired, and she was too lazy to put on a show of sisterly affection. She did not even look at her and was about to walk away. However, before he could act, his whole body flew out like a kite, and with a pang, he hit the door pillar. Li Yang stayed on the bed for a moment. After Lian left, he slowly clenched his fists, his face revealing a trace of resentment. He suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed abruptly. Suddenly, he chuckled. Jiang Ruan's eyes did not open, but the corners of her mouth slightly curled up. And this was only the beginning. Jiang Ruan had always been gentle in front of them. Even in private, no matter how they opposed each other, she had never said it so bluntly. But today, she had said it out loud. Jiang Su raised her head in shock and saw Jiang Ruan's gaze of undisguised loathing. It was as if she was looking at a bug in a rotten ditch. And on the day that the reservoir really collapsed, Xian Li's actions were deliberate. He had disregarded the lives of thousands of people downstream of the reservoir. She did not know whether this Eighth Highness, who had always paid attention to his perfect reputation, could bear this crime. Thinking about it, it was something even more regrettable than in her previous life. With a schwa sound, he felt a silver light flow in front of him. It was beautiful and cold, and its speed was unbelievably fast. Huiju only felt an icy coldness in his throat. The dagger in the youth's hand was pressed against his lower jaw. From this angle, he could only see the side profile of a peerlessly beautiful face. "The person who injured you is in the Jiangfu. If you want revenge, tell me the situation clearly without leaving out a single word," Lian said. Jiang Ruan gently leaned her head against the window of the carriage and closed her eyes. There were faint dark circles under her eyes, which could not conceal her exhaustion. Li Yang thought about it again and shook his head. "I was too drunk at that time, so I didn't see clearly. However, that person seemed to be wearing a red robe." Eldest Jiang Miss framed second Jiang Mississippi. Li Yang didn't intend to hide it from him and directly told him the name of the murderer. Even though they had many doubts in their hearts, they did not ask. Naturally, she has her own plans. Eldest brother just happened to be unlucky and became the sacrificial lamb in this police station. Lian did not feel the slightest bit sad about his elder brother's fate. Instead, he spoke in an indifferent tone. This made Li Yang feel even more stifled. Although Li Yang was angry at Lian's cold attitude, he did not dare to openly oppose Lian. Moreover, he still needed Lian to help him take revenge. He carefully recalled what had happened at that time and slowly recounted it to Lian. When Jiang Ruan returned to the Jiangfu, she was preparing to return to her own courtyard. She had just walked to the garden beside the long corridor when she unexpectedly bumped into Jiang Su and Jiang Chao. Jiang Su was talking to Jiang Chao when she saw Jiang Ruan and smiled. "Dejia." In the Prime Minister Fu, Li Yang, who had been unconscious on the bed for a long time, finally regained consciousness. "I hit you, so what?" Jiang Xing's words were shocking. "Do you want to complain to father?" "Jiang Chao, are you a 3-year-old child? Quickly let father come and save you." Li Yang angrily said, "Are you happy to see me like this? No one in the Prime Minister Fu will fight with you anymore. Are you satisfied now?" Towards the end, his tone became more and more intense. With a peng sound, the maidservant's head was smashed until it bled, but she still did not dare to move. She gritted her teeth and stood stiffly on the spot. Seeing this, Li Yang was about to throw again when he heard a low voice from outside, "Eldest brother, what's wrong?" "You!" Jiang Chao choked on her harsh words. Simply arrogant to the extreme. On one hand, Li Yang was very jealous of this younger brother who was more outstanding than him since childhood, but had a very strange temperament. This was because Li Yan's excellence served as a foil to his incompetence. On the other hand, he felt a sense of dependence on Li Yan because Li Yan was extremely intelligent. As long as he was there was nothing that could not be solved. She actually dared to castrate Li Yang in broad daylight, separated by a wall, and then brazenly framed Jiang Su. Jiang Su covered her mouth and looked at Jiang Xing in horror. "Dijia, what did older brother say wrong? If you have any dissatisfaction, then direct it at Sun Yang, don't be angry at older brother." Jiang Su came out to smooth things over, but her words were full of provocation. The carriage rumbled towards the Jiang Fu. Seeing this, Jiang Quan angrily said, "Rebel! Rebel!" This had become even more so after they returned to the capital many years ago. Although the emperor's favor did not decline, who knew how much sincerity there was in it? However, Guan Liang Han was different. Firstly, he was someone who had been stationed at the border for a long time and did not have much contact with the powers in the capital. Secondly, this person was rather straightforward, so the emperor trusted him very much. After this success, just the Zhao family's contribution would certainly not be enough. They also needed to pull Guan Liang Han in. As long as they were concerned about Guan Liang Han, the emperor's heart would more or less be more lenient. Moreover, Jiang Xing's appearance would only be beneficial to his future career and would not be detrimental. Everyone said that one had to climb up step by step and should not be overly hasty. Jiang Xing had already been promoted to deputy general and had also made military contributions. If he could save thousands of lives of the common people downstream during the flood control, he would naturally be rewarded. In this way, once he stepped into the highest power center of the great Jin dynasty, he would naturally stand higher than others. Jiang Xing was doing this for her, so she was also paving the way for Jiang Xing. And the first path was to step on the flesh and blood of the people in the Prime Minister's household. In the 8th prince's residence in the capital, Xianli sat in front of his desk and slowly picked up a cup of tea to take a sip. Lian had been talking to him for the entire afternoon. Tomorrow would be the 3 days that the monk had mentioned, but the rain was slowly lessening and almost stopping. Xianli slowly relaxed his brows. The 5th prince's move was ultimately useless. After tomorrow, the official who had recorded the flood control would report this matter to the imperial court. His reputation among the common people would be even higher, and there would be even more people supporting him in the imperial court. At that time, he would throw the monk under house arrest into prison and interrogate him. If he was able to reveal the 5th prince's identity, then it would truly be perfect. However, Li Yan's previous words rang in his ears, "Your Imperial Highness must not underestimate the eldest daughter of the Jiang family. This woman is cunning and cruel. If you let her be, she will definitely become a great calamity in the future. If you can recruit her, she will be of great help." He didn't know what this was hinting at, but a faint smile floated in front of him. She was just a little girl who was still wet behind the ears. Was she worthy of the word help? Xianli was slightly surprised. He didn't know why, but there was a trace of unease in his heart. A subordinate entered the door and reported, "Your Imperial Highness, the reservoir has been inspected, and there is nothing wrong. We have sent soldiers to guard it, but there is nothing unusual." Xianli waved his hand. "You may leave." He ordered a group of soldiers to approach the reservoir to prevent anyone from tampering with it. After a long time, he suppressed the unease in his heart and slowly smiled. They were just a group of jumping clowns. Why should he waste so much effort? Meanwhile, in a quiet courtyard in the capital, the environment was quiet and secluded. There were several people dressed as imperial bodyguards guarding the door, and the fragrance of tea curled up in spirals from the room. In front of the window sat a yellow-robed monk who was silently chanting Buddhist scriptures. This person's appearance was peaceful and calm, and he had the bearing of an eminent monk. As he was silently chanting, he suddenly paused and opened his eyes. The imperial bodyguards did not slack off in the night. Night had fallen and they could not see clearly outside. Under the illumination of the bright red lanterns hanging under the eaves, there was a very fine drizzle drifting down, almost disappearing into the night. The rain seemed to be about to stop. Huiju looked on silently and slowly opened his hands that were tightly clenching the prayer beads. His palms were already dripping with sweat. After tonight, if the heavy rain did not arrive as scheduled, Huiju knew better than anyone what would await him. These past few days, from time to time, people would come in to talk to him. Although their tone was gentle, their words were an invisible threat and pressure. He could only pretend that he didn't know and ignore them. Those people did not make things difficult for him. Xianli was a person who valued his reputation. Before tomorrow, he would treat Huiju with courtesy. After tomorrow, Huiju would become a demon monk who caused trouble and chaos in people's hearts. Any punishment would not be excessive. Huiju slightly narrowed his eyes. This was a game, and it seemed that he was about to lose. However, he could only endure it. If he changed his words now, it was inevitable that the people behind Jiang Ruan would vent their anger on his son. He closed his eyes again and slowly began to silently chant Buddhist scriptures. Jinying Wang Fu. Xiao Xiao silently finished reading the letter in his hand. The snow pigeon landed on the desk and made a goo-goo sound. After a long while, he said, "Take my official seal and invite General Guan over." Jin Yi received the order and left. Xiao Xiao stretched out his hand and lightly tapped the letter with his slender fingers. His eyes were cold and clear. Jiang Xianji, Zhao Yuan Jia. The continuous rain seemed to have washed the capital's night sky clean. Especially in recent days, the rain had lessened. Tonight's night sky was very clear. It seemed that in the next second, the bright moon would hang above the willow branches by the lake. The surrounding area of the Bochang Reservoir was calm and tranquil. The faintly discernible rain gently fell on the surface of the water and set off shallow ripples, like the gentle and intimate whispers between lovers. There were guards with swords patrolling the edge of the reservoir. The common people in the area downstream had already fallen asleep. In the midst of the tranquility and peace, there was a sudden splash from afar, like the sound of something falling into the water. The guard standing by the water raised his drowsy eyes and said to the person beside him, "What was that sound just now?" His companion waved his hand, "I don't know." "Go and take a look." The guard rubbed his eyes and kept walking forward until he reached the place where the sound of something falling into the water had come from. He looked in and asked, "What happened?" There were shallow ripples on the surface of the water. With the weak light from the fire, there seemed to be something there. The guard took the torch in his hand and bent down to take a closer look. Suddenly, he felt a chill on his neck. Before he understood what had happened, his body had already collapsed. The person who came dragged him to the side and quickly stripped off his clothes and put them on himself. He then picked up the torch on the ground. After a while, the other guard saw that his companion who had just come to inspect the situation had finally returned. "What took you so long?" "What happened just now?" the guard asked. The companion who came back shook his head and yawned. "Be careful. If someone finds out that you were dozing off during the night watch, neither of us will have a good time," the guard said impatiently. The companion who came back lazily put the torch in front of him. Only a weak light fell on his face and it was impossible to see his face clearly. The guard rambled on and suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned his head abruptly. "Something's wrong. Aren't you?" His voice stopped abruptly. There was a sharp knife in his abdomen. The stranger was wearing their companion's clothes and was looking at him expressionlessly. The guard struggled to reach for the signal flame in his arms. Before he could reach for it, a hand snatched it away. Then, he saw many ghost-like black shadows appear around the dark reservoir from afar. It was like a large net that had been woven long ago, quietly approaching the reservoir. The dull sound of fighting rang out in the darkness. That night, someone in military attire set out with 300 elite soldiers to ambush Bo Chang. It was a one-sided massacre. Hands rose and fell, and blood flowed. That night, someone slept soundly. In the warm and exquisite mansion, the fragrance of smoke curled up in spirals. It was a good night's sleep. That night, countless black shadows sneaked into the houses of the common people at Bo Chang Reservoir. The common people moved overnight. That night, in the deep courtyard, the yellow-robed monk closed his eyes and chanted. He meditated the whole night. The more he thought about it, the more frightened he became. He was appalled, but on second thought, it must be that the Grand Chancellor Fu had done something to Jiang Yuan. Otherwise, why would there be such a deep hatred? Ever since he returned to the Jiang Fu, although he had inquired about Jiang Yuan, everyone in the Fu had kept quiet. There were many things that even the maids and old women were not clear about, so there was no need to mention it. Jiang Yuan said indifferently, Li Yang wanted to take advantage of me, so I castrated him. The Li family hates me to the bone. If they are still alive, sooner or later, they will become my enemy. If he doesn't die, then I will. If I don't destroy the entire Li family, I will not be able to rest easy. She said it lightly, but Jiang Xing's heart was racing. At first, he was extremely surprised, then he clenched his fists tightly. You've gone too far. He put the note into his bosom. Leave this matter to me. He looked at Jiang Yuan. Yuan, if eldest brother had come back a day earlier, you would not have suffered such humiliation. Jiang Yuan smiled slightly. It's nothing. Humiliation was not terrible. What was terrible was to suffer humiliation without knowing it, never having the chance to turn things around, and living a miserable life. Just like in her past life. Jiang Xing strode out the door. In the 8th Prince Fu, Xianli fiercely smashed the 9-dragon glazed teacup in front of him. The teacup fell to the ground, splashing crystal fragments. His muscles tensed up, and the gentleness on his face was swept away, replaced by a bone-deep anger. What happened? Didn't you say that there was no problem with the dam? If there was no problem, why did it collapse? He smashed the booklet in his hand on the body of the closest advisor. The advisor did not dare to breathe loudly. This was the first time that the usually gentle 8th prince had lost his temper with an advisor. He had always been very skillful in controlling his emotions. Even if his heart was filled with hatred, he could still smile at his enemies like a spring breeze. No one knew the anger in Xian Li's heart at this moment. Why did it have to happen now? His merits were about to be fulfilled, he had a reputation among the people, and the emperor was very fond of him. As long as he added this merit, the direction of the court would be more obvious, and a large number of officials would naturally follow him. In this way, he would have more manpower in his hands, and in the future, his bargaining chips would be heavier. These days, he had wholeheartedly devoted himself to the matter of the reservoir, thinking that it was foolproof. Why did it have to be at this time? Xianli had always been a person who was unwilling to admit defeat. This time, such a thing happened. This time, such a thing had happened, as if he had been slapped in the face in front of everyone. But the Bo Chang Reservoir was the largest reservoir in the capital of the Great Jin dynasty. It was related to the drinking water of the common people in the capital, and it was also the source of irrigation for thousands of mu of fertile farmland. If it was a small amount of greed, then it would be fine. But if it was too much, then it would be a vermin of the country. Especially at this critical juncture, Li Yan's actions were no different from silencing someone. Moreover, his actions were the lives of the common people. The entire court was shocked, and the emperor was furious. Without saying anything further, he issued an edict. The prime minister's Fu had taken bribes and perverted the law. The dam had been damaged, and their crimes were unforgivable. They were to be sent to prison to await trial. At that time, Lian was in the 8th Prince's Fu talking to Xianli. Xianli angrily said, "What is going on? How could what that monk said be true?" Lian was also somewhat confused for the first time. After thinking for a moment, he said, "There must have been some preparations. This matter definitely has something to do with the Zhao family. Last night, His Highness's bodyguards all disappeared without a trace. It could be assumed that they had all fallen into the hands of the Zhao family and Guanliang Han. But in the end, these soldiers are part of the military. How could they not leave behind a single trace? What's the use of leaving traces?" Xianli said. "I certainly cannot tell others about this matter, so I can only suffer in silence. Moreover, since the other party dared to kill people without any scruples, they must have a way to deal with it." He clenched his fists. "The Zhao family? They actually sided with the 5th Prince. Your Highness, I still feel that there is something fishy about this matter. It may not be the 5th Prince's doing," Lian said. Xianli looked at him with an unfriendly gaze. "Lian, this prince has already trusted you many times, but this time I have failed. Your Highness, I will accept any punishment." Lian hurriedly knelt down to beg for forgiveness. As he lowered his head, a trace of ridicule flashed in his eyes. "Forget it." Xianli waved his hand. At this moment, Imperial Father must be furious. "I must beg for forgiveness. Otherwise, there will be no way out." As he spoke, suddenly, an Imperial bodyguard hurriedly walked in from outside. When he saw Xianli, he hurriedly knelt down and said, "Your Highness, something has happened." Xianli frowned. "What happened?" The Imperial bodyguard glanced at Li and Xianli said, "Speak." "His Majesty has issued an edict to arrest the people of the Grand Chancellor's Fu and throw them into prison to await trial." "What?" Lian suddenly stood up. The Imperial bodyguard hurriedly explained the ins and outs of the matter. Xianli frowned tightly. It seemed that the one who benefited the most was the 5th Prince, but the Zhao family had also benefited a lot. How could the generals Fu, which had always stood aloof from worldly affairs and sought to remain neutral, act out of character? The disappearance of hundreds of elite guards last night must have had something to do with them. When did the methods of the generals Fu become so cruel? And Guanliang Han, why did Guanliang Han get involved? Lian's mind quickly linked these events together. Generals Fu, Guanliang Han. Suddenly, a name appeared in his mind, Jiang Xing. The generals Fu was Jiang Xing's birth mother's maiden home, and Jiang Xing was Guanliang Han's deputy general. A young girl's faint smile appeared in front of his eyes, her charming yet solemn eyes, and her expression that seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. He suddenly remembered what Li Dong had mentioned to him yesterday, "Your eldest brother wants to marry that slut, Jiang Yuan. The Jiang family has already prepared to send the Gung invitation." At that time, he had been busy checking the surroundings of the reservoir to see if there was anything amiss, so he had been too lazy to argue with him. Now that he thought about it, these words were like a bolt from the blue, ruthlessly smashing into his heart. For Li Yang to want to marry Jiang Yuan, he must have wanted to torture her because she had castrated his body. And before the Gung invitation could be delivered, the Grand Chancellor's Fu had been raided. A frightening conjecture floated in his mind. Why did the general's Fu change from its usual gentle style to become cruel and ruthless? Why were the Guan family troops there? Could it be that all of this was related to Jiang Yuan? While he was waiting for an opportunity to capture his prey, the prey was aiming at his backyard. Making a noise in the east and striking in the west, what a good diversion. Lian stood rooted to the ground, feeling that it was difficult to bear the melancholy in his chest. He suddenly stiffened his neck and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Young Master Li!" The Imperial Guard was shocked. Xianli also looked at him in shock. Lian was an extremely shrewd person, and he was extremely intelligent. When had he ever been so absent-minded? He frowned and said, "You first." "Your Highness, I still have some things to do." Lian suddenly cupped his hands towards him. Lian will leave first. After saying this, he leaped out of the window and disappeared without a trace. Your Highness, do you want to chase after him? The Imperial Guard asked. Xianli waved his hand. No need, he is an intelligent person. I don't think he would do something pointless. He rubbed his forehead. These sudden events had made him extremely tired. He really couldn't understand how things had turned out this way when they were so close at hand. Now that the Grand Chancellor's Fu was like this, it really put him in a dilemma. Abandoning the carriage to protect the general, but this carriage was one of his most important bargaining chips. How could he be willing to give it up? That monk still hasn't been brought over? Xianli asked irritably. Even if the dam was man-made, the sudden increase in the rain was not something that could be done by a human. Could it be that the monk really had some ability? If that was really the case, if he could be used to snatch the monk from the fifth prince's hands, it could be considered as making up for the previous and profitable business. As he spoke, an imperial guard suddenly rushed in and said in a panic, "Not good, Your Highness, the monk has been kidnapped." In the Guan residence. Guan Lianghan paced back and forth, looking at the pensive Xiao Xiao. He couldn't help but say, "I can't hold it in any longer. Why didn't you let me ask Jiang Xing about what happened last night? Damn it, he actually dared to steal my commander's seal. Also, why did you suddenly transfer people last night? Aren't you afraid that Kid Xianli will recognize your embroidered uniform guard?" He won't say. Xiao Xiao sat down in front of the desk. "Look carefully, someone wants to deal with the Li family." The Grand Chancellor's Fu. Guan Lianghan suddenly laughed out loud. The Grand Chancellor's Fu has been sealed, how delightful. That old man Li Dong, I have long since found him an eyesore. For so many years, he has been putting on airs with the face of the Grand Chancellor. This time he has suffered a big loss. What did you just say? Someone wants to deal with the Li family? Who? Jiang Xing. Jiang Xing doesn't know anything, it's useless to ask him, Xiao Xiao said calmly. He won't say anything, it's really making me anxious. Guan Lianghan said, how did the Zhao family get involved? Also, is that monk next door really so capable? Just because he said that the rain is getting heavier and the reservoir is going to collapse, you all came over and moved everyone up the mountain? This is too goddamn amazing. Keep an eye on Hui Ju, find a few people to protect him, Xiao Xiao reminded. Xianli will definitely go around asking about his whereabouts, and even kill him to silence him. I know. Guan Lianghan rubbed his hands together. Xianli's enemy is my friend. This monk is so interesting, making Xianli's previous efforts in controlling the flood go to waste. Even if it's to make things difficult for Xianli, I will still protect him well. Xiao Xiao nodded, many thanks. Don't mention it. Guan Lianghan looked at Xiao Xiao and sighed, I don't know what you are being so secretive about, third brother, I still have to give you a piece of advice. Don't get involved in the messy affairs of the imperial court, lest you get yourself involved. Having been fellow disciples for so many years, he naturally understood Xiao Xiao's temperament. He would inherit the Jiang Fu in the future, and in any case, Jiang Chao was his younger brother. Jiang Xing, however, remained calm and collected as he pushed the words back. Finally, he did not agree to anything. The old Jiang madam had been extremely astute all her life, and when she encountered the Jiang siblings being so stubborn, she was naturally somewhat displeased. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, her attitude gradually cooled down. She waved her hand and said that she was tired. After Jiang Yuan left, she said to Kai Ke, who was beside her, I originally thought that he was a treasure, but in the end, he is someone who does not know how to adapt to circumstances. Eldest young master has a grudge against madam, but after this resentment, everything will naturally be fine. After all, we are still one family, Kai Ke advised. How is it a grudge? It is clearly a grudge. The old Jiang madam sighed deeply, let them toss and turn, it is time for Xia Yan to suffer. Although she loved Jiang Chao dearly, she could not do without him. After all, Jiang Quan was not her biological son, so she only needed to protect the prosperity of the Jiangfu. To her, whether the future head of the Jiangfu was Jiang Chao or Jiang Xing, it made no difference to her. Jiang Ruan and Jiang Xing walked out of Guilan Yuan, and Jiang Ruan said, "Zuma must be angry with you. I do not care for the position of Jiangfu." Jiang Xing's voice was low, "Don't mention help. It is best that there is no need." Jiang Ruan smiled. This was because the Jiangfu would eventually collapse in the future. There was no need for a dying person to worry about the flourishing flowers in life. As she spoke, she saw a corner of a robe peeking out from the garden. Jiang Ruan smiled slightly, and suddenly raised her voice, "Since Zuma wants to recognize eldest brother as the head of the family, it is naturally Zuma's intention. Eldest brother must think carefully." Jiang Xing was slightly surprised, but when he saw Jiang Ruan's expression, he seemed to understand something, and laughed, "Exactly." Jiang Ruan and Jiang Xing glanced at each other and both laughed. The two siblings of the Jiangfu were carefree and leisurely, but naturally, there were also people who were not so carefree. For example, the Grand Chancellor Fu that had been sealed up, and the Li family members that were locked up in prison. Everyone in the Grand Chancellor Fu had been locked up by the officials, but Lian had been left out. The second young master of the Li family had absconded to avoid punishment, and the entire capital had been searched for him, but his shadow had not been found. This was a major event in the capital, so every day, there were bailiffs searching the capital for him. The second young master of the Li Fu had always been extremely clever, but no one knew where he was hiding. Even if there were 10 Jiang Xings, they would not be able to save her. Jiang Dan looked thoughtfully at Xia Yan and Jiang Xing. Suddenly, she pulled the curtain of the carriage. The timid expression behind the curtain disappeared, and the corners of her lips slowly curled up. The carriage trod on the flagstone road that had just been rained, creating shallow splashes of water. Watching Jiang Ruan's carriage depart, Jiang Xing had no intention of leaving. Xia Yan smiled and asked Jiang Xing, "Do you not need to go to the army today? General has official business to attend to today, there is no need for me to go," Jiang Xing replied. Xia Yan was anxious and asked, "Then, Xing, why don't you go to the courtyard and stay there? Today's weather is very good, and I want to stay at the Fu's entrance for a while longer." Jiang Xing smiled, "Mother, is there something you need?" Now that the sky was gloomy and the rain was incessant, where did the good weather come from? Xia Yan bit her lip and said, "Nothing." Seeing that Jiang Xing had no intention of going back even after a long time, she became extremely anxious. Gritting her teeth, she turned around and walked back into the house. After Xia Yan left, Jiang Xing's expression became solemn. He beckoned 2 imperial bodyguards over and instructed, "Watch the Fu's entrance carefully. If anyone comes out, follow them and knock them unconscious." The 2 imperial bodyguards obeyed and left. Jiang Xing recalled what Jiang Ruan had told Lu Zhu to tell him last night. She had only said to prepare 3 identical carriages and find 2 imperial bodyguards with high martial arts skills to follow them all the way to the Zhao residence. He did not know what Jiang Ruan wanted to do. If Jiang Ruan really wanted to hide something, as her eldest brother, he could do nothing about it. And Jiang Xing would not force Jiang Ruan to say something she did not want to say. He trusted his sister. But for some reason, his eyelids kept twitching today, as if something bad was about to happen. He forcefully suppressed the uneasiness in his heart, mounted his horse, and galloped in the direction of the General Fu. When Xia Yan returned to Yan Huayuan, a manservant came over to say that Jiang Xing had already left. Xia Yan immediately stood up and said anxiously, "Quick, find 2 people and quickly tell them that the second carriage is Jiang Ruan's. Don't make a mistake." The manservant hurriedly complied and left. Only then did Xia Yan sit down on the chair and let out a long sigh of relief. Lin Lang handed her a cup of tea. Xia Yan drank a few mouthfuls of tea before she managed to suppress the panic in her heart. Thinking of Jiang Xing's every move today, she felt somewhat uneasy. She asked Li Momo, who was beside her, "Momo, do you think they discovered something? Otherwise, why would they suddenly change carriages?" Li Momo comforted her and said, "Furin, don't worry." After saying this, he looked at Xiao Xiao and suddenly said, "However, since you and I are from the same sect, as a second brother, have always been very generous. If you tell me what you are going to do today, I will lend you the commander's seal. Otherwise, even if you take the commander's seal, I can think of a way to make it impossible for you to command them. I'll lend you the soldiers to chase after Lian," Xiao Xiao said. "Lian?" Guan Lianghan said, "Do you know where he is? Why are you chasing after him?" Seeing that Xiao Xiao did not speak, Guan Lianghan seemed to have thought of something. "Is it the mission that His Majesty gave you?" Xiao Xiao put away the commander's seal, turned around and left. "Many thanks." "Hey, I'm not finished yet." Guan Lianghan angrily said, "For such a big matter, I also want to go. Lao San, wait for me." His voice gradually faded away. That morning, Jiang Ruan woke up very early, and so did the three servant girls. After serving Jiang Ruan a meal, Lian Xiao began to pick out clothes for Jiang Ruan. Bai Ji said, "Today we are going to pray for blessings, so let's find something plainer." In the end, Lian Xiao chose a plain blue patterned raindrops brocade with a collar and a long jacket with a flap of the front, and a plain green shawl with twining twigs and flowers scattered on the outside. Accustomed to seeing her wear bright red and bright clothes, wearing such plain clothes, coupled with her indifferent expression when she was not smiling, gave her a cold and plain appearance. As Lu Zhu combed Jiang Ruan's hair, she said, "Miss, I'm afraid that there will be many dangers today. Why don't you find one or two items for self-defense?" Jiang Ruan nodded. The hair bun that Lu Zhu combed for Jiang Ruan was full of sharp hairpins. The hairpins were long and pointed, and could also be considered a weapon. Finally, when they left, Bai Ji thought for a moment, then took out a dagger from the drawer under the table. This dagger's handle was inlaid with a layer of silver, and it was decorated with a few pearls. Bai Ji looked at the somewhat blunt tip of the dagger, but still handed it to Jiang Ruan. "Miss, take it. It's better than not having it." Jiang Ruan weighed it in her hand, then put the dagger into her sleeve. As soon as the four of them left the Fu, they saw a carriage parked at the side. Jiang Dan, Jiang Li, and Jiang Su Su were squeezed into one carriage. Jiang Chao was alone in his carriage, but hers was left alone. Jiang Ruan looked inquiringly at Xia Yan, who said gently, "Ruan, you are the eldest daughter of the Jiang Fu, and you have many servant girls with you. If you were placed in another carriage, I'm afraid that they would not be able to serve you well. Mother has specially found a carriage for you." Jiang Ruan looked at the carriage that had been specially found for her. The exterior of the carriage was magnificent. Even if there were two imperial bodyguards who were highly skilled in martial arts, it would not matter. This was because Lian was not bringing one or two people, but a group of soldiers. The real elite soldiers that the Prime Minister Fu had raised outside. Chapter 91. They sped along the way. As the carriage traveled along the mountain roads, it was inevitable that it would shake violently. Fortunately, the coachman that Jiang Xing had found was an expert in this area. The coachman was able to steer the muddy road smoothly without any discomfort. The cliffs were rugged and steep. The cliffs looked like a broken sword that had been cut off. It was frightening. The mountain forest was dense. Occasionally, the night owls resting here would be startled by the sound of the carriage passing by. They would fly into the sky, leaving behind a black shadow. Originally, in the past, this section of cave-y cliff had high mountains and deep valleys, lush foliage, and jagged rocks of strange shapes. It was a dangerous place, and there would always be rich families stopping here to enjoy the rare scenery and beautiful scenery. However, ever since it began to rain incessantly in the capital, the roads were muddy and the sun was nowhere to be seen. Gloomy, dark clouds pressed down, and the originally beautiful scenery became a bit gloomy. The 5 carriages silently moved forward. At the very front was Jiang Chao's carriage. He was the only carriage that looked different. It was not as exquisite as the others, but it was not shabby either. This was followed by Jiang Ruan, Jiang Su Su, Jiang Li and Jiang Dan's carriages. The coachman did not speak, neither did the occupants of the carriage, and the only sounds that could be heard were the whip striking the horses and the wheels turning. Jiang Ruan leaned against the soft cushion in the carriage. Lu Zhu was steaming tea for her. The carriage that Xia Yan had prepared was indeed exquisite. There was even a small table inside. In the morning, Jiang Ruan had been hurrying on with their journey, so she had eaten very little. Lian Xiao and Bai Ji had brought along some snacks for themselves. Lu Zhu was deft with her hands. She had pickled the plum blossoms that she had picked the day before and used them to make plum blossom steam tea for her in the carriage. A sweet smell gradually spread out from her carriage, drifting in the air and reaching the noses of the people in the carriages behind. Jiang Li snorted disdainfully, she really knows how to enjoy herself. Looking around, she secretly cursed the maidservant beside her for not being as quick-witted and considerate as Jiang Ruan. She did not even prepare a snack. Jiang Su Su already had something on her mind. Seeing that Jiang Ruan was still in the mood to drink tea and eat snacks at this moment, her face under the veil could not help but tighten. She said in a low voice, "You're courting death." On the other hand, Jiang Dan was leaning against the carriage window, sleeping lightly, as if she didn't care at all. The road in front of Shuani Cliff was relatively easy to walk on. After walking for an unknown period of time, they arrived at the most dangerous part of the road. The terrain was narrow, and there were valleys on both sides. There was only a small path in the middle, which was just like the mouth of a gourd. Hence, it was called Gourd Mouth. The valleys on both sides of the mouth of the calabash were dense forests. When the first carriage reached the mouth of the calabash, a rustling sound came from the forest. The carriage stopped abruptly. Lian Xiao and Bai Ji's hands stopped moving. They became nervous. Beads of sweat began to form on Lu Zhu's forehead, but Jiang Ruan was still slowly sipping her tea. Her posture was very graceful. The horse sensed danger. No matter how hard the coachman lashed the whip, it refused to take a step forward. The Jiang Fu's imperial bodyguards all drew their swords, but the 2 imperial bodyguards that Jiang Xing had sent stood in front of Jiang Ruan's carriage, not moving an inch. Their complexions were already suffused with the stench of blood. Jiang Li screamed and was the first to shout, "What's going on?" As if they had found a place to vent their anger, a loud rumbling sound was heard, causing the ground to tremble. Unbeknownst to them, a large black mass of people had appeared on the valleys on both sides of the gourd's mouth. The coachmen were startled. These people were dressed like mountain bandits, and all of them rushed towards the carriage. "Retreat! Quickly retreat!" The Jiang Fu's imperial bodyguards hurriedly protected the carriage as they tried to retreat. However, the bandits' movements were unexpectedly nimble, and in the blink of an eye, they were right in front of them. Apart from Jiang Xing's 2 imperial bodyguards, the Jiang Fu had brought a total of 20 imperial bodyguards. These 20 imperial bodyguards had no choice but to exchange blows with these mountain bandits. For a moment, only the pang 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 sounds of swords colliding could be heard. The wind was like frost, and from time to time, hot blood would bloom and splatter onto the curtain of the exquisite carriage. How can there be mountain bandits? How can there be mountain bandits? Jiang Li screamed loudly. However, as soon as she lifted the curtain of the carriage and saw the horrifying scene outside, she immediately fainted from fright. Jiang Dan huddled tightly in a corner of the carriage, and the 2 servant girls protected her tenaciously. The 3 of them bit their lips and refused to speak. There were only 3 horse carriages that were the calmest. Jiang Chao's carriage was at the very front, but these murderous mountain bandits had bypassed it. At a glance, only Jiang Chao's carriage was completely clean, saving the Jiang Fu's imperial bodyguards from rescuing him. This was very strange. Jiang Su Su sat in the carriage with a cold smile on her lips. The more desperate the battle outside, the more delighted the smile on her lips became. It was dragged forward by the horse in front for a few meters, and finally stopped a few feet away from the edge of the cliff. The horse did not even look back as it charged into the clouds on the cliff, disappearing without a trace in an instant. The carriage flipped to the ground, and Baiji climbed up, covering her head. She hurriedly went to support Jiang Ruan. "Miss, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Jiang Ruan tucked the dagger back into her sleeve, and supported herself with the dewdrops as she stood up. The three of them were disheveled and dirty, and they rolled on the ground, looking battered and exhausted. At the same time, the two bodyguards that Jiang Xing had sent over also caught up. Seeing that the carriage's rope had been cut, and that it had fallen so close to the cliff, they simultaneously breathed a sigh of relief. When they looked at Jiang Ruan again, their gazes were full of admiration. It was rare for her to be so calm in such a chaotic situation, with clear judgment in her mind, and even decisively cut the rope to save her own life. Even after escaping from death, her expression was still as calm as ever. He had never seen any young miss with such courage. But when he thought about it, with such an awe-inspiring older brother who was not afraid of death, his younger sister would not be any worse. However, they heard the sound of approaching footsteps behind them. Their expressions turned cold, and they turned sideways to block Jiang Ruan. These soldiers dressed as bandits split into 4 groups, and the group that was chasing Jiang Ruan also had about 100 people. They all stared at Jiang Ruan fiercely. In front of them was a hungry wolf, and behind them was a cliff. They were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered, with no way out. Jiang Ruan quietly watched. Suddenly, she heard a clap, clap, clap sound in front of her, and a familiar voice said, "Eldest Jiang Miss is really elegant. In such a dangerous situation, you can still be so calm." The soldiers automatically opened a path, and the man in gray walked out from behind. His steps were extremely slow, as if he was deliberately declaring something. Jiang Ruan smiled. "Second young Master Li is really magnanimous. You have already become a stray dog, but you still dare to go out in broad daylight." These words poked at Li An's sore spot. His expression suddenly changed, and he stared at Jiang Ruan fiercely. Suddenly, he thought of something and smiled. "If I were eldest Jiang Miss, I would certainly not use words to win the moment, lest I suffer more physical pain in the future. Pay!" Without waiting for Jiang Ruan to speak, Lian Xiao had already put her hands on her hips and scolded, "A prisoner still dares to go around ostentatiously. My miss is fine, but you, on the other hand, are lawless and out of control. Be careful that you don't lose your head the next day, and your corpse will be hung on the city gate for 3 days." The Scarlet Thunder Army was the last trump card of the Prime Minister Fu, and they only listened to him. Li Dong and Li Yang did not know about this secret, so how could Jiang Ruan know about it? Jiang Ruan smiled slightly. "Second young Master Li is afraid? What is it that you are afraid of? Because your flawless secret has been exposed?" The Scarlet Thunder Army was restless. Looking at Li An's expression, they also knew that Jiang Ruan was a great threat to Lian, and the weapons in their hands were unconsciously aimed at her. If a secret is hidden for too long, it will no longer be a secret. Jiang Ruan's voice was soft and indifferent, but Lian felt that she seemed to be reminding him of something. He suppressed the panic in his heart and sneered, "Nonsense. Second young Master Li's actions today, isn't it because you want to redress the Prime Minister Fu's grievances?" Her hair was disheveled, and her clothes were dirty because she had rolled in the mud just now. Yet, she still stood where she was, delicate and delicate. Unexpectedly, there was an almost austere beauty. She said, "Unfortunately, from the moment you made this decision, the Prime Minister Fu no longer had a chance to turn things around. You have lost." Li An's heart skipped a beat, and the feeling of unease rapidly expanded. He wanted to order his subordinates to immediately capture Jiang Ruan and stop her from continuing. However, Jiang Ruan quickly said, "Privately raising troops, intending to rebel, having the intention to rebel, the crime is clear. Is it serious?" She said, "Today, your actions have truly solidified the deadlock of the Prime Minister Fu." Lian felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He slowly, very slowly raised his head, and as if he was sleep-talking, he asked, "Those rumors, were you the one who spread them?" Jiang Ruan returned him a faint smile. The Prime Minister Fu had stood tall in the court for many years without collapsing. How could it completely collapse because of the negligence of the reservoir? If the emperor really executed the Prime Minister Fu's entire family just like that, it would inevitably cause the court officials to be bitterly disappointed, and the structure of the court would naturally undergo a sudden change. As a ruler, he was most afraid of instability in the hearts of the people. There were many forces in the court that mutually checked and balanced each other. Even if such a balance was to be broken, it had to be done step by step. How could it be overturned in one go? Unfortunately, at this time, Li An's concern was chaotic and he had lost his usual calm. Jiang Ruan asked Jiang Xinji to help spread some rumors to Li An's ears. Li An was bound to be restless. True and false, false and true and true. Once an extremely intelligent person lost his rationality, he would definitely not be as good as an ordinary person. He let the Red Thunder Army hidden in the dark appear and pretend to be mountain bandits.